My parents died and left me nothing. No house. No savings. Just a rusted warehouse in a part of town I hadn't seen in years, and a key I almost threw in the trash. But the morning I finally unlocked that door, my 6-year-old daughter grabbed my hand and said something that stopped me cold. And what we found inside didn't just change our lives. It revealed a secret my parents had been keeping from me for decades. I almost sold it. I almost walked away. What I didn't know was that walking away would have cost me everything I didn't even know I needed yet. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. My parents left me a rundown warehouse, but when I walked, I want to tell you something nobody tells you about grief. It doesn't always come in waves. Sometimes it comes in paperwork. My name is Joel. I'm 34 years old. I drive a '09 Honda Civic with a busted AC, and every morning I make dinosaur-shaped pancakes for a 6-year-old girl named Cora who has her mother's eyes and my terrible stubbornness. I have been raising her alone for 4 years now, since her mom, Vanessa, decided that motherhood wasn't the life she'd imagined and left us with a sticky note on the kitchen counter and a half-empty bottle of rose. I don't say that to make you feel sorry for me. I say it so you understand what my life looked like before everything changed. Small, contained, carefully managed like a controlled burn. Just enough warmth to survive, not enough to spread. My parents, Frank and Lorraine Calloway, died 6 weeks apart. Dad went first, a stroke quiet and fast, the way he lived. Mom followed him like she simply refused to stay in a world he wasn't in. The doctors called it cardiac failure. I called it a broken heart because I think some people are just built that way, wired to another person so completely that the circuit doesn't work alone. I flew Cora and myself from Columbus to Dayton for the funerals. She wore her white dress with the yellow flowers. She held my hand the whole time and didn't ask why I kept walking outside to stand in the cold. Then came the estate meeting. My older brother, Rick, sat next to me in the attorney's office with the energy of someone who had already spent the inheritance in his head. Rick and I were never close. He was the golden son, the one who stayed local, the one who showed up to Sunday dinners. I was the one who left, who struggled, who called on holidays and felt the silence on the line like something physical. The attorney, a tired-looking man named Gerald, laid out my parents' estate. The house went to Rick. The savings, split. The old Ford truck, Rick. And then Gerald looked at me over his glasses and said it plainly. To Joel, the property at 412 Hartwell Road, Dayton. A warehouse. Approximately 8,000 square feet. Currently unoccupied. Rick made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I stared at the deed like it was written in a language I almost recognized. A warehouse. My parents, who clipped coupons and drove used cars and never once seemed like people who owned warehouses, had left me a building I'd never heard of, in a part of town I hadn't visited since childhood. I drove past it that same evening, Cora asleep in her car seat behind me. I slowed in front of it without stopping. It was gray. It was tired. The windows were filmed with years of dust, and the iron door had rust bleeding down it like old tears. What on earth were you trying to tell me? I thought, looking up at it in the dying light. I didn't go in that night. I wasn't ready. But something about that building looked back at me like it had been waiting. Have you ever felt like your parents were trying to tell you something they never got to say out loud? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know I'm not the only one. I went back on a Saturday. Cora was with me because Cora is always with me. That's just the math of my life. She had her little purple backpack on, the one with the broken zipper we kept meaning to replace, and she was eating a granola bar and asking me questions about clouds. She asked me why clouds don't fall. I told her I didn't know. She accepted that with the grace only 6-year-olds are capable of. We pulled up to 412 Hartwell Road at 9 in the morning. The neighborhood was quiet, a few old industrial buildings, a tire shop 2 blocks down, a church with a hand-painted sign. The warehouse sat between 2 empty lots like something forgotten between sentences. I had the key the attorney gave me, an old brass one, heavier than it looked. Is this ours, Daddy? Cora asked, standing in front of it, granola bar raised halfway to her mouth, staring up. I think so, Bug. It looks sad. I looked at her. Yeah, I said. It does. The lock fought me. Of course it did. But it gave finally, with a sound like something exhaling after holding its breath too long. The iron door swung open and the smell hit me first. Wood, dust, something faintly floral that made no sense for a warehouse. Like someone had kept flowers in here once. We stepped inside. And I stopped walking. The space was enormous. High ceilings crosshatched with old steel beams, afternoon light cutting through the dust in long golden columns. But it wasn't the size that stopped me. It was what was inside it. Along the far wall, floor to ceiling, shelves. Hand-built wooden shelves, rough but sturdy, filled with things. Boxes, labeled in my mother's handwriting. Old furniture covered in canvas sheets. A workbench along the left wall, tools hanging neatly above it. And in the center of the floor, unmistakable, the frame of a boat. A wooden boat. Half-built. Sanded smooth in some places, raw in others. My father had always talked about building a boat someday. I remembered that the way you remember things you dismissed, vaguely with a small sting of guilt. He'd actually started. I walked to it slowly. I ran my hand along the curved hull. The wood was smooth under my palm, and something cracked open in my chest so fast I had to press my hand flat against it just to breathe. Daddy. Cora's voice was small behind me. Are you crying? I wiped my face with the back of my hand. No, Bug. She put her small hand on my arm. It's okay if you are, she said simply, and went back to her granola bar. I stood there in my dead father's unfinished dream, in a building I never knew existed, and I understood, for the first time since that phone call in March, that my parents hadn't left me nothing. They'd left me everything they never knew how to say. I locked the warehouse back up and didn't return for 11 days. That's what I do. That's my flaw if you want to name it cleanly. I feel something enormous and I put distance between myself and it. I did it when Vanessa left. I did it when my dad had his first stroke and the doctors said to prepare. I did it now. I told myself it was practical. The building needed a structural inspection. I had work. I managed inventory for a mid-size logistics company from home, which paid just enough and asked just enough of me that I could still be there when Cora got off the bus. I didn't have time for warehouses and unfinished boats and feelings that had no clean edges. Rick called me once during those 11 days. You should just sell it, he said. No greeting, no warm-up. Classic Rick. That property's probably worth something, even in that condition. Split it with me and we call it even. Mom and Dad left it to me, Rick. They left it to you because they felt guilty, Joel. You know that, right? Because you were always the one they worried about. A pause. I'm not saying it to be mean. I'm saying it so you don't go building some fantasy around a broken building. I hung up. Not angrily, just firmly. But the thing about Rick was that he had a talent for planting seeds in soil he'd already salted. His words sat in me. They felt guilty. Was that it? Was the warehouse a consolation prize? A sorry we weren't better wrapped in rust and old wood? I almost believed it. Then one night Cora found one of my mother's labeled boxes in the back seat. I'd taken one without fully meaning to. She dragged it into the living room and opened it before I could stop her. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Of me. My school plays, my little league games I thought nobody had attended. A birthday party I had completely forgotten. Every single one was labeled on the back in my mother's handwriting. Joel, age 8. Joel, first day of 5th grade. My Joel. I sat on the living room floor with my daughter and held a photograph of myself at 7 years old, grinning with a missing tooth, and I felt something in me shift. The way tectonic plates shift. Quietly. Permanently. They had been watching. They had always been watching. They just hadn't known how to close the space between watching and showing up. I understood that more than I wanted to admit, because I was doing the same thing. Act 4. Forced proximity. 450 words. I went back to the warehouse on a Wednesday. Alone this time. Cora was at school. I told myself I was just assessing the space. Practical. Adult. No emotions involved. I had the door open, a notepad in hand, when I heard someone on the other side of the building. Not a ghost sound. Actual footsteps. And then the side door, a door I hadn't even noticed, swung open and a woman walked in carrying a wooden crate, a pencil tucked behind her ear, and absolutely zero awareness that she was about to walk into another human being. She saw me and stopped so fast the crate tilted and I lunged forward without thinking and caught it. We were suddenly very close, both holding the same crate, both breathing a little harder than the situation required. "Who are you?" we said. Simultaneously. A beat. Then she stepped back, and I got a proper look at her. She was maybe my age, maybe slightly younger. Natural hair pulled back, paint-stained jeans, a gray t-shirt with a faded logo I couldn't read. She had the kind of face that didn't perform anything. What she felt moved across it directly and honestly, and right now what she felt was somewhere between alarmed and annoyed. "I'm Naomi," she said, voice steady. "I rent the back studio space. Have for 2 years." She crossed her arms. "Who are you?" "Joel. My parents owned this building." "Own it?" "I own it now." I stumbled over the tense. Grief does that. Something shifted in her expression. Softened slightly. Frank and Lorraine's son. The sound of their names in a stranger's mouth nearly took me out at the knees. "You knew them. Your father used to come in on Saturday mornings," she said, her voice quieter now. "He'd work on that boat for a few hours. Sometimes we'd share coffee. He talked about you." I didn't know what to do with that. I stood there like a man who'd just been handed something fragile and had no idea if his hands were clean enough to hold it. "There's a lease agreement," she said carefully, watching me. "Paid through the end of the year. I can show you paperwork if you need." "No," I said. "No, it's fine. Stay." She nodded, picked up her crate, walked toward the back studio. At the doorway she paused. "He was proud of you," she said without turning around. "Your dad." He said it like it was the simplest fact in the world. She disappeared through the door. I stood in the middle of the warehouse, alone, completely undone. I started coming back. Regularly. I told myself it was because of the boat. I'd found my father's notebook tucked under the workbench, pages of careful diagrams and measurements, his handwriting small and precise. If he started it, maybe I could finish it. I was not a man who built things with his hands. But I was a man who needed something to hold on to. Naomi worked in the back studio most mornings. She was a furniture restorer. She took broken, discarded pieces and rebuilt them. Chairs with missing legs. Tables with warped surfaces. Dressers that had been left on curbs in the rain. She brought them back. We talked the way two people talk when they're pretending they're not paying close attention to each other. Carefully. Sideways glances disguised as practical conversation. One morning she came to the front to borrow a clamp and found me sitting on the floor with my father's notebook, completely still. "You okay?" she asked. "He wrote notes to himself in here," I said. "Like reminders. Measure twice. Go slow. Let the wood tell you what it needs." I looked up. He never talked like that. Not to me, anyway. Naomi sat down on an overturned crate, unhurried. "People are different when they're doing something they love," she said. "My mom was impossible to talk to. But she used to write me these long letters she never sent. I found them after she passed." She paused. "People carry more than they know how to give." "How long ago?" I asked. 3 years. She was quiet a moment. "I moved into the studio about 6 months after. Your dad found me sitting on the front step one morning, trying to figure out if I could afford the rent. He let me set my own price." A small smile. "He said a building with no life in it goes to ruin faster." I thought about that. Then I said, "I wasn't here. When they needed me. I was 3 hours away and I told myself distance was just geography." Was it? The question sat between us, clean and unapologetic. "No," I said. It was fear. I didn't know how to be around people who loved me in a language I couldn't quite read. She looked at me for a long moment. Not with pity. With recognition. I know that language, she said quietly. I grew up in it too. That was the moment. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just two people on a dusty floor recognizing something in each other that they'd each been carrying alone for far too long. Right about now, I need to ask you. Have you ever met someone at exactly the right broken moment of your life? Tell me in the comments. You might be surprised how many people feel the same. Cora met Naomi on a Thursday. I hadn't planned it. Cora's after-school program was canceled and I had no backup. The eternal single-parent equation with no solution. So I brought her to the warehouse with her homework and her colored pencils and her ability to immediately take over any room she entered. Within 10 minutes, she had found Naomi's studio. I heard them before I could intervene. Cora's voice asking a rapid-fire sequence of questions with no pauses for answers, and Naomi's low laugh threading between them like something warm. I stood in the doorway. Naomi was showing Cora how to sand a small piece of wood. Patient, demonstrating the grain direction, letting Cora try. Cora's little face was locked in with the fierce concentration she got when something genuinely interested her. You made this? Cora was asking, pointing to a restored rocking chair in the corner. I fixed it, Naomi said. Someone else made it a long time ago. What if it was too broken to fix? Naomi considered this with full seriousness. I've never met a piece of wood that was too broken, she said. Sometimes it just takes longer. And sometimes what looks like a crack is actually just character. Cora thought about that. Then, my dad is fixing a boat. I know. He cries sometimes when he thinks I'm not watching. I closed my eyes in the doorway. That means he's doing it right, Naomi said gently. The things worth building always cost something. That evening the three of us ate sandwiches on the workbench. Naomi had run to the deli 2 blocks down without being asked, just appeared with a brown bag and drinks like it was nothing. Like she'd been feeding people in this building for years. Maybe she had been. Cora fell asleep on a folded canvas sheet in the corner. Her colored pencils scattered around her like fallen soldiers. I sat across from Naomi in the lowlight and we talked, really talked, about our parents. About the particular loneliness of loving someone whose absence has a different shape than a stranger's would. About what it means to stay when everything in you says run. At one point she said, "You're different than how your dad described you." Better or worse? She smiled into her drink. Softer. I didn't know if that was a compliment. The way she said it, though, like softness was a thing worth noting, worth protecting, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. I didn't want to go home. That scared me more than anything else had. Rick showed up on a Friday. I don't know how he found out I was spending time there. Small family networks and loose lips, probably. He came in the front door without knocking, hands in his jacket, looking around the space with the eyes of a man calculating square footage into dollar signs. Naomi was in the back. I was at the workbench. You've been here a lot, Rick said, not a question. I've been working on Dad's boat. He walked around the frame slowly, like he was performing inspection. Joel, come on. You're not a carpenter. What is this, therapy? Maybe. He stopped, looked at me straight. I've had a developer reach out. Commercial space in this area is appreciating. He's offering $240,000 for the property, as is. I set down my sandpaper. I need you to think about Cora, Rick continued, voice dropping to something that sounded almost like genuine concern. You're a single dad making $50,000 a year. That money could change her life. College fund. Better apartment. You could stop grinding yourself to dust. And the infuriating thing was, he wasn't entirely wrong. That was the trap of it. This isn't your decision, I said. It's not. But I'm your brother and I'm telling you. You haven't been my brother in a long time, Rick. I said it without heat. That almost made it worse. The silence got thick. Then Naomi appeared in the studio doorway. She'd heard enough. I could see it in her face. Rick turned, registered her, turned back to me with a slow, knowing look I wanted to erase. "So that's why," he said quietly. "Don't," I warned. "I'm just saying, make sure you know the difference between what you want and what this place means." He left, door swinging behind him. Naomi stood in the doorway, very still. "He's not completely wrong, you know," she said. "Naomi." "I'm serious, Joel." Her voice was careful, controlled. "I knew your father. I cared about this space. But I can't be a reason you make a decision that hurts your daughter." She stepped fully into the room. "And I think we both know something has been building here. Between us." She gestured between us without drama. "And I need to know that you're clear-headed. Because I don't do halfway. I can't. I am clear-headed. Are you?" Her eyes held mine. "Or are you falling in love with a building and calling it healing, and I just happen to be inside it?" She walked past me and out the side door. And for the second time in my life, I stood in a room and watched someone leave, and did absolutely nothing. 3 days. That's how long I sat with it. I went to work. I made Cora her dinosaur pancakes. I helped her with her spelling words. Wednesday, February, friend. That last one hit differently than it should have. I drove her to school and I sat in the parking lot a little too long before heading back home. I thought about the warehouse constantly. Not about the money. About my father's handwriting in that notebook. About the way the morning light came through the high windows and landed on the boat frame like something deliberate. About Cora sanding wood with focused little hands and Naomi's patient voice explaining grain and character and how broken things weren't finished things. I thought about what Naomi had asked me. "Are you falling in love with a building?" I sat with that question like a man sitting with an X-ray, looking for the fracture. No. I was falling in love with what the building had shown me. About myself. About my parents. About the version of me that could stay in one place and build something real instead of managing it safely from a distance. And yes, I was falling in love with her. I knew it the way you know weather, not by calculation but by what you feel in your chest when the sky changes. I called Rick on the second day. Told him no on the sale. He didn't argue as hard as I expected. Maybe he heard something different in my voice. Maybe he'd said what he needed to say and was content to let me live with it. On the third morning I drove to the warehouse before dropping Cora at school. I wanted to see it empty, quiet, before I did anything. I sat in the car and looked at that iron door with the rust running down it like old tears. And then Cora said from her car seat, unprompted, "Daddy, is Miss Naomi going to be there today?" "I don't know, Bug." "I hope so." A pause. "She fixes broken things. And she likes us." 6 years old. 6 years old. I turned to look at my daughter, her mother's eyes, my stubbornness, and apparently a wisdom that belonged entirely to herself. I got out of the car. I unbuckled Cora. I took her hand and I walked to the side door, Naomi's door, and knocked. A long moment. The door opened. Naomi looked at me, then down at Cora, then back up at me. Something moved across her face, that honest, unguarded face that never performed anything. "I brought her to school late," I said. "On purpose. Because there was somewhere more important to be first." She stepped aside and let us in. The studio smelled like wood shavings and linseed oil and coffee. A chair was mid-restoration on her work table. Legs reattached, surface freshly stained a deep walnut. It was beautiful in the specific way that restored things are beautiful, carrying the history of being broken inside them. Cora immediately went to look at it, hands clasped behind her back the way I must have taught her without realizing, studying it with intense 6-year-old authority. Naomi leaned in the doorframe between her studio and the main warehouse, arms crossed loosely, watching me. "I don't want to sell it," I said. "Not because I'm confused. Not because I'm romanticizing a building. Because I finally understand what my parents were doing." I looked at the space around us, the boat frame visible through the door, the shelves, the light. They built a life in the language they knew. Quietly. With their hands. They saved things here. And they saved it for me because maybe they knew I needed this. Somewhere to land. Naomi was quiet, listening. "And you're right," I said. "Something has been building between us. And I'm not hiding from it. I'm not managing it from a safe distance." I took a breath. "I've been doing that my whole life and I am exhausted by it." She looked at me for a long moment. In the silence I could hear Cora humming something to herself by the restored chair, the small sound of her filling the room with the particular ease children have in places where they feel safe. "I need slow," Naomi said finally. Her voice was low, careful, honest. "I need someone who shows up. Not perfectly. Just consistently." "I can do consistent," I said. "I've been making dinosaur pancakes every single morning for 4 years. I know consistent." She laughed, a real one surprised out of her, and something in the room exhaled. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, Joel." I crossed the room. I didn't reach for her hand or pull her close. We weren't there yet and we both knew it, and that was fine. I stopped close enough that it was a declaration. She looked up at me and didn't step back. "I'm going to finish the boat," I said. "I know. I'll probably need help." "I know that too." Cora appeared in the doorway between the studio and warehouse, granola bar now materialized from somewhere in her backpack, looking between us with calm, ancient eyes. "Can we stay a while?" she asked. "Yeah, Bug," I said. "We can stay." We dropped Cora at school 20 minutes late. The teacher gave me a look. I gave her an honest smile and no explanation. That afternoon I drove back to the warehouse alone. I put on my father's old work apron, hanging just where he'd left it. I opened his notebook to the first page. I picked up a piece of sandpaper. And I began. The boat took 7 months to finish. Naomi was there for most of it. Not always helping, sometimes just present, the sound of her work in the back a kind of anchor. Cora came on weekends and appointed herself official sander of small pieces. We ate bad takeout on the workbench more times than I can count. We argued twice, real arguments. Once about whether to tell Cora what we were becoming, once about a moment I shut down instead of talking. Both times we chose to stay in the room until it was resolved. My parents taught me that too, eventually. Just a little late. On a Saturday in October, we rolled the finished boat out of the warehouse on borrowed trailer wheels. Cora named her Lorraine, without hesitation, like she'd known all along. I held it together mostly. Naomi's hand found mine and stayed there. I looked back at the warehouse, that gray, tired building that had been quietly holding everything until I was ready to walk through the door. "What on earth were you trying to tell me?" I'd asked it once in the fading light. Now I knew. They were telling me to stop running, to let something be built, to trust that love, real, lasting, quiet love, doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits for you in a dusty building on Hartwell Road, in a woman with paint-stained jeans who fixes broken things, in a 6-year-old who sees straight through you and loves you anyway. Sometimes it waits as long as it needs to, because the right things always do. If this story moved you, if you've ever been handed something that looked like loss and turned out to be the greatest gift, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment below. Tell me what your warehouse was. I'll be reading every single one. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.